Educational sciences. Easy. Somewhere. Probably no more on that side.
So we'll get started in about another minute or two. Are we live?
We're live.
We're live, all right. So welcome to today's Active Teaching Lab. A few people coming in. Anyone else over there in the corner? So welcome to the Active Teaching Lab. Today we're going to talk about, I think, a two-pronged subject. The first is personalized learning, and then the second prong to that is connecting students to opportunities for personalized learning. So maybe it's a pretty vast topic, so hopefully we can narrow it down in a few ways. In front of you, on the tables, you have a few pieces of information in front of you. The first is the schedule for the rest of the semester, so March through May. It shows the labs and the topics that we have coming up. You also have a copy of today's activity sheet, the paper version. At the top of this sheet, you have the Canvas course URL. If you can log in, you can participate and contribute to the digital version of this activity sheet. Obviously, the links to this page are indeed not active. So logging into that, taking notes, sharing resources on the activity sheet is a great way for all of us to continue the conversation, but also as a way to create a resource bank for everyone else. And then finally, we have the purple sheet. So at the end of today's lab, fill out a few comments. How was this lab helpful for you? What would you like to see in the future? And any additional comments that you have about the lab, and that would be very helpful for us. Do we have any first-timers today? Awesome. Jen and Libby.
And Allison. I wrote it down, but I wrote Allison.
Awesome. I'll get you. AJ, could you grab me another name tag? Oh, there it is.
Probably right there. Yep.
Perfect.
Perfect. Interesting.
So the way we're going to sort of run today's lab, I'd like to start out, since we're a little bit of a small group, we'll start off with some more personal introductions. So your name, the department or unit that you're from, and also what you would like to leave here with today. So what are some of the questions and goals that you have for your own learning on the topic of personalized learning and connecting students to that. And if possible, please contribute and collaborate on the digital activity sheet with any resources that you can share. But before we get to that, there is one announcement that I would like to make from a colleague of ours, Karen Skiba, who's sent out the call for applications for the Teach Online at UW program. We'll put the active link to this in our activity sheet. And so the application is coming up sort of the end of April 2020 or sooner if possible for summer planning and designing and getting involved in that. So if you're interested in that, the URL is at the top, teachonline.wisc.edu. So if we could start, Molly, could we start with you to introduce yourself? What brings you to today?
I'm Molly. I'm a postdoc in the Department of Psychology, and we are working on projects to try to get research out to people who are less familiar with the research, and so teachers, parents, that kind of thing. And so everybody's coming with a different background and
Okay.
wanting to help work on personalizing that kind of way.
Okay.
My name's Kenny. I'm a graduate student in the kinesiology department, and just here to listen mostly, kind of try and pick up on what other people are doing.
Is there any personalized learning going on in the kinesiology department as far as your
I mean, looking through the activity sheet, I'm kind of picking out stuff that has been done in my own classes or classes I've worked with,
Okay.
so it's certainly there, but I'm just curious what other people are doing.
Okay, that's good. AJ.
Yeah, hi, I'm AJ Daughtry-Krill. I work in Do It with AT with a high school program called ITA, it's a free college here on campus. And so I actually lead with our high school students a couple different forms of independent project work curriculum. So I'm very interested in this topic, and I think I'm going to try to reflect on what I'm doing that's working and what I'm doing that I haven't tried or isn't working.
Okay,
What
sounds
else?
good. Great. Cory.
Howdy, I'm Cory. I'm part of the academic technology. I'm here with the learning analytics hat on. Individualized learning is actually one way of doing learning analytics. I'm really interested in hearing how you are doing individualized learning. Hear from your examples.
I'm Eric Yan, a prof from nutritional sciences.
Okay.
I teach introductory nutrition course to largely freshman and sophomore,
Okay.
all the way up to senior. And I am looking for ideas to have individualized content and yet meet the learning objective that is geared more toward the base of those taxonomies or the specific facts that I want them to remember, and yet have individualized content.
And how many students do you have per semester?
This semester, 120.
Okay. It's a small class. Duncan.
Hi everyone, Duncan Crosswood, faculty of physics. Interested in personalized learning for teaching a small class of 50 or more students. But I'm also, I guess it strikes me, I also supervise scientific study research, about 6 students each semester. So I've actually only just moved that to Canvas and trying to structure it. There are many great ideas in here, I see already.
Okay. John.
Two things that I'm
Who are you?
interested in this topic is one, having students take agency for their learning, for personalizing their learning, so that we don't have to figure out how to personalize for 100 different students that we've never met before, because it gets hard. And then the other one is how do we build in flexibility in our courses to be able to sort of allow for that process of searching and connecting to content that makes sense to us as students.
Sure. Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Sell, and I'm a workplace English language instructor housed in the Cultural Linguistic Services Unit in the Office of Human Resources.
Okay.
Thank you. My students are actually employees working here who come from different language backgrounds, and our courses are English classes. We do a lot of personalization because like Molly, our group is so diverse. We try to, we need to do that, and for effective language learning, that's especially important. A challenge we have is we have very little time with the group.
About how much time?
We work with them twice a week for 12 weeks for an hour. So we already do things like assign communication activities, so students take what they learn in the class, language skills, and then they go and practice them throughout the week with their supervisors. These are all workplace English goals. So we try to do things like that, but that's not necessarily personalized to their own ability levels or other interests. So.
Libby.
I'm an occupational science PhD, and I'm the TA in the occupational therapy program for our research courses.
Okay.
And we're just always looking for ways to increase engagement around a topic that is not necessarily a peak interest.
Okay, welcome. Iman?
Hi, I'm in English. I'm an assistant, teaching assistant. A lot of the courses that I teach are those that they have to take.
Mm-hmm.
So with me, it's kind of like striking a balance between cookie cutter rubrics and instructions and individual variability and freedom.
I like that cookie cutter. It fits well with today's reflection. Great.
My name is Cory Schmidt. I'm an instructional designer with Do It Academic Technology. So I'm still new to campus, new employee here. Moved from out of state recently, so middle of winter.
You can do it.
I did it. So, I'm just here to learn what topics and questions people have and to synthesize and think and hopefully help in return.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I work in the veterinary medicine curriculum.
Okay.
And I also work teaching the student. I work teaching them in their core years where they get a large load of material that we expect them to memorize, and then they probably forget. And then I work with them their final year when they are doing more clinical work too. And I think in an event, that when they come in the first year, the first semester, in the event to try to support them as much as possible, because it is a large amount of information, they get very handheld in a very structured environment. And I'm trying to figure out how to get them more motivated. Their senior year, they're so used to being fed, they're not all good at figuring out how to go look for the information or how to access something in a way that will help them. And so I'm trying to figure out how to stop leading them.
Yeah,
Stop them wanting to. They're so
them.
used to being led, and I don't know how to turn them around and say there's another way that this doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah.
And you will have to go out and not kill patients. So please learn to think for yourself.
Right. Hopefully we can help you find that magic bullet for that. So, Angela.
I made a tent and then I left it over there. Sorry.
I did the same thing.
I will get your tent.
Angela Kia, instructional staff. I teach a senior level capstone course where students get sort of a research-like experience, and most of the students have not had any research experience. And so we do a lot of stuff in the class to try to get at that, but I guess I'm kind of thinking about personalized or maybe more individualized learning, because I teach a biochemistry course, but it's not a biochemistry in the biochemistry department. So all my students are chemistry and biology, which are different. And so finding ways to provide that extra maybe content or resources to help each student kind of who might need that extra information, so we're not spending too much time covering how proteins are targeted in a cell.
But sort of as a remedial resource or
kind
a review resource?
Maybe
kind of
review, or maybe so some students may be review and some might be oh, this is a topic it would be helpful to at least have an idea of if you've never heard it before. So
sure.
I guess it's more on the individualized or different, I don't know what category that is. I don't think it's personalized per se. Which I could, well,
I think
maybe
I honestly think it's
somewhere
a
in that
very
mix.
broad term, personal.
But yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, sort of, what do you call that?
Self-directed?
Self-directed, or there's a term for point of, when you have a neat, anyway, I'll come up with
nebulous self-generated learning
yeah.
ability.
So you could say catch-up material, or
okay.
that kind of stuff.
Awesome. And then I don't remember if I introduced myself to those of you that came in. My name is JT. I work in Do It AT as well. I'm also a PhD candidate in the Department of French and Italian. And I'm really blown away by the question of scale with personalized learning. I don't know about 150 students in a classroom. I think Eric, you brought that up. How do you make that so each individual student can sort of find their own niche? It's similar to the same question that you're raising as well. So that's sort of where I'm going from with this. But since we have a lot of new participants as well as our returners, I'd like for you to discuss with your new table friend these 3 similar questions just to kind of get the ball rolling, and then we're going to get back to these questions and concerns that you have, so sort of generate a little bit more campus connections and a little bit more topic. So this first is sort of what are your experiences with personalized learning? I think you sort of already answered these in your introductions. But in some instances, does your department offer any customization? As a graduate student, I'm required to have a PhD minor, which can be distributed, so kind of made the way that I see fit to fit my own research profile or research interest. So that's a way that I also can come to that. And also, are there any features of Canvas or any other types of programs, maybe H5P Pressbooks for you, Angela, that can offer that personalized sort of mastery path connection that you're not unaware of, or you think might be useful for further exploration? So maybe take 5 or 6 minutes, go through these questions, make a new friend, and we'll come back in a few minutes.
So, I'm in the psychology. Working on projects that are addressing like there's a lot of research on
so I've both been a TA instructor.
A lot of people want to know.
So it wasn't a whole lot of personalized.
No, so so we're thinking about how do we get the research knowledge out to like your teachers.
Yeah.
Sort of the only thing that really stands out is
like that's remedial or learn something you're interested in, or your parents were struggling.
final project for another course.
Right. So everybody's coming with very different background. So trying to think about what do we know, and there are something out there that's very quick, unpersonalized, that are just like course on
But it'd be great, like, if someone
So-
user or whoever could be like, here's the things I know, and then, or I know I'm comfortable with writing, fill in these gaps. Yeah.
So I had some kind of similar experience with ESL. What he had was
Anything that's choice work or
it's
like it's just evolving
so
projects.
give them topics and answers, and then our next one would be guided.
Just for those that may.
Would you agree?
Might be a summary.
Yeah, no, I think that's
Because
good, like,
I haven't even dug into it, but I know that it
Any
exists.
topic, if we get a
But something that is a little less painful.
Yeah, or like articulate.
It
My own
it wasn't like
personal learning experience is actually like practical. It's a freshman class biology course, and they had different topics, and they all got 5 paths. But so for each topic, they teach you that they go through some of the basics, and then
overarching goal of like,
pick something
we're working
into
with
a
Canvas
deeper,
for
much material
and then
that I have to
create
cover, and so much of it is mandatory.
Yeah, so with the rest of the class, so like
to Canvas,
feel like a
so
lot of
Animal Kingdom, so
reading
they
the course
pick like a
within
pilot or an
something
animal.
outside the box
like,
because
pretty much
everything
And
is
so
very
like you go through all these things, and then they can create like a movie
So,
efficiently as possible.
in that sense,
And
like,
poster, like
the
very
only thing I feel like I
it's
did
very
any kind of personalized one so far is
and
find
then
something
use it
out.
I have one person that only has 40 people,
put
and so
a course I was cheating for.
they do what we go through all these cases as the 2 weeks progress, and then at the end
My
they say,
department,
write me a note
teach
and tell me what your
Because it's
what
like
Yes.
awesome.
we're under school medicine.
What keeps you on
And
watching yourself
big
in the future.
So they have a
Yeah, like that's where I
yeah,
feel like I've
so,
gotten because otherwise they all get the same
again,
exercises.
when we were all
Because
little
I
way,
and we we talk and I let them talk to each other.
I kind of joined
in the whole
after.
stuff.
Didn't exist anymore. And then they do
Yes,
stuff like
that's mostly what it is, but they all get the same thing. So, you know, because I've only worked in one thing for through a website. They can choose an activity for their patient, and they don't all have
Canvas
to
wasn't necessarily outward.
So again, like, it's core curriculum to get in. So the medical stuff is often very, and that doesn't mean that the school we couldn't change it, but I think it's going to happen. I would
Suggested really like so it's articulated I would say
At the same time, I had to connect to my work.
I remember how I articulate
they're so that
and I've developed
they're not into being creative. They're like, tell me what to do, but I don't want to have to think about it.
I don't want to fail as
So
high
I
school.
we have like a
And I
base
use
learning in a sense
competitive
where
internship, and I
given
use
a thing as I want to be
competitive
able to
residency, and I
click
use
buttons to
and like they lose sight of the very
A lot of it is more, here's the idea, let's talk about it.
They lose sight of the fact
But
that
whenever
they
I
have to
was-
be
now that I
and
teach,
there's maybe not one piece of it that's gonna work for
It's a lot of it,
Technology.
you had all the built-in feedback already, so they could like,
Okay.
get their senior year talk. So it's meant to be like a discussion. But I can see how you, the way it's set up, it's like a PowerPoint,
and always kind of like,
that's how I would describe it, and you can
They would have to be someone who
I have
understood
to
it.
hit about 3 buttons, click on this
It's all
button, get
about
more information, go back,
taking all that, thinking about how to figure out, so they have to, and it would probably be someone in their technology already, you know? It's such a specialized highlighted issue, how they're all connected. So yeah, this is my struggle. And I think I'm probably good at boxes that are probably yeah, and there's a certain amount of like, they vary much story if they're not all doing the same thing, that they're missing something.
Right, which is fine, but,
45.
because I know it.
They don't want different things, they all
I think
want
you
the
have to,
same thing.
I think you have to sit down and listen to the
Oh, to get a,
just
for half an hour. Cool, so like that's something
So,
free.
I think you can do it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't come in the
that's
creative
one
cloud, so it's like the actual desktop.
Got it. But it works on it.
So it's,
Ridiculous.
yeah, it's always,
Like that. Ridiculous.
I've got money for projects, so.
Right, and then that's
there's a cost, but there's ways potentially
Yeah.
No,
I don't know
But
what
then-
like, do it actually utilize
But, yeah.
Alright, so let's maybe come back to the larger group. If we can, it seems like, I hate to disrupt conversations, but it's part of that. So it seems like a lot of the conversations are turning around the question of how do you get students to actually want to do something more than what we're forcing them to do. So to break out of that cookie cutter mold, but also in your case, Jen, sort of encouraging them to pursue their own personal goals for language learning, for example. And to me, at least, sort of listening to a lot of your conversations, they start with a very simple question or simple gesture ask, or is you just ask the student what is it they want to do, which is easier said than done, right? When you have students who don't know what they want or what they want to do either immediately or in 10 years. I think a lot of us can empathize with that. But if we ask students what to do, let's just play the hypothetical, and they give you an answer. What are some easy examples of ways you could customize I don't want to say customize the experience because it's not really buying a car in a classroom, but what are some sort of easy ways that even in a class of 150 individuals or even more, or 10, that you could personalize their access and experience with course content? One easy one that comes to mind for me is student curated content. So for example, when I'm thinking of it this way from the perspective of a graduate student, where everyone is collaborating to create a combined bibliography for a course. So students pursue their own research interests in a way, so whatever their paths may be, but towards the end of the semester you leave with a research guide. So imagine you have a topic on 19th century French literature, there's 1,000 different options, but everyone's not necessarily interested in the same thing, but you're coming together. And Angela, you mentioned in your discussion, you have experience with a lot of high school students working independently and then presenting in the end.
I had, an experience with personalized learning, but yeah,
It was a
essentially.
great experience.
Yeah, essentially the students, it was a freshman level biology course, and so it was Corona High School, they do all personalized learning, everyone gets an iPad or something, it's all great. But the teacher would sort of cover a new topic and go over some basics, but then the students were invited to sort of pick a topic within that bigger umbrella and kind of get a little more in depth and then create something to share back with the group. And the something could be like a short video that you make on your tablet, or it could be a poster, so it could be either digital or physical media.
Okay.
And then they got a chance to kind of go through it and teach each other. So that was a good way to do it too. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah,
I'm
so
sorry.
just sort of to share that experience. So if we make it maybe a half step harder than asking students to find 1,000 different images or videos that represent course content or how they feel about course content, how could we get to something that's a little bit harder? What would be another example, do you think? Either completely unrealistic or maybe it's realistic, we just haven't figured it out. Allison, what do you think?
I don't feel like I know the answer to your question.
Well, that's cool too. But what would personalization look like? What would be an example of, in your instance, of how you can connect students to their own personalized content?
I mean, sometimes I have a small model I got our facilitator to mock up for me online portal that through Qualtrics, where they've all kind of looked at the same clinical case and they've kind of tried to figure out what the most likely problems this patient has are, and then I say, okay, I will give you 2 additional tests you can run on this patient.
Okay.
And there's a big list and they can choose whichever 2 they want. They might not get helpful information. They might get helpful information. And then we talk about it as a group afterward. They all choose different ones and we talk about why did you choose which ones and actually which ones would have really gotten to the core to split between your major differentials.
Sure, okay.
So then at least it gives them some autonomy to do something that I don't force them to do.
Yeah, but also I would say maybe in this example, it's maybe a case study where they're each picking a path they think is appropriate, but in the end, they're still coming back and sharing that experience, whether it's they went down the wrong path and they went down the right path, maybe for different reasons. Other examples of personalized learning that you could envision in a course that you teach, either scalable, not scalable, reasonable, unreasonable? Eric, you said you have 150 students in your course. Do you think, what could a personalized learning experience look like in nutritional sciences?
Well, actually, John has an idea that we have been doing for decades, that students, part of the objective for the course is they understand what nutrients human needs. So they record their own diet, they analyze their own diet, they compare their own diet to dietary guidelines, and they compare their own diet to dietary reference intake, and we ask them to reflect the goods and bad of having those dietary standards.
Okay.
Identify problems.
What do you think? Do you think that's what's hard about that for you?
I was like, oh, do you have them track the diet, right? And it's like, yes, they've been doing it for decades. They're tired of that. Is there anything new for that? And I think it's a wonderful way to say, we're already doing personalized content all the time. Nutrition is very personal, right? And everybody has their own sorts of, I don't want to call it fetish interests, but interests like, I want to do the no sugar thing, so I'm going to look at no sugar. I'm going to do gluten free, so I'm going to look at that. So there's all of these things, but is there something, like if you've already been doing that forever, what do you do now? They're tired of it.
Have you ever asked them?
Well, actually, one of the key challenges, there's no shortage of students in our department who are somewhat obsessive and compulsive. And that's part of the things that we want to deliver, that those dietary guidelines are just guidelines, not standards, and it doesn't fit everyone's lifestyle. It doesn't necessarily fit everyone. So I think part of the challenge is how do we, in the end, accomplish the learning objective, because we can have a very extensive discussion and still every student gets something different out of it. Some of the more obsessive ones, compulsive ones, that they don't get the message. They reinforce what they have been believing along the way, and that's the part that I'm so worried about when I start giving them personalized content, because they will get something totally different from what I want them to get out of, which is to treat the subject more academically and treat it as a science, approach it with an open mind.
Yeah, I don't know if this is helpful, but so part of what I do is sort of related to the medical school education, first year med students, and so they do case studies in the curriculum now, which has been new for a couple years, but they do this really interesting thing where they break out into small groups and they're given sort of the case at the beginning of the week, and then their first step is they actually have to determine what learning objectives they need to kind of uncover to follow the case, or essentially to give recommendations to the patient. So there could be a way to sneak in your learning objectives, or have the students maybe come up with the learning objectives, that are your learning objectives. But then if your learning objective is, realizing there's flexibility, coming up with those kinds of things, but having them tell it to you and then build that into the knowledge they're gonna go out and find, that might be a way to kind of get at that. So they're still doing the personalized part of like figuring out how to reach that objective, but they also had to like either be told or figure out what that objective is too, and that might help kind of guide them back to a place that you want them to end up. Because if they're stabbing out in all different directions, they could go down a path that's just not helpful for, getting to where they need to be. So that might be a way to, add that in somehow. But are they case-based studies that they're doing, or is it just, I missed the
online discussion. I think in medical school, in small group discussion,
Yeah.
it work because you can monitor it.
Right. They always have a facilitator in each of these rooms to help, like, if they're getting too far over here, say, actually, let's maybe think about this part to kind of bring people back. So group work could help, maybe. Personalized group work.
Yes. So we have tried to break it into a smaller group, and it ended up create a lot of work.
For you, right? Well, for them too, for both.
Yes, both.
Yeah.
And it's kind of tricky.
For
It's
sure.
kind of tricky. A lot of time we spelled out what we want them to get, and yet still a lot of students don't get it. That's why I'm worried about trying to sneak in.
Yeah, fair enough.
Do you think it would be helpful if you shared that sort of rubric with them before they venture off on their own journey and say, this is, I don't want to say the A of the course is this sort of shift in culture, shift in mindset, and do you think that would spoil the surprise, or?
Yeah, student might interpret that differently. It just depends on what they perceive themselves to be. You say you want to shift how they think, approach a subject. So no.
Sure.
And I think part of the barrier for me is there's only that much time I want to spend on the course. And that's always become a barrier because a lot of times then I would move shift so that PA has to do with facilitation, and a lot of time it may or may not work.
Sure.
Sometimes if I think there's going to be an ingrained mindset in some group of students I'm working with, I try to open whatever we're going to talk about with like an example that there's clearly, like, I set it up and they're like, oh, clearly this is what's going to happen. And then we're like, oh no, and we were wrong too. We thought the same thing, and guess what? We were wrong, and we shouldn't have made this assumption at the outset. So if you can find a correlate example with nutrition of like, I assumed that this person who was eating fries their entire life, which probably is bad, like whatever it was, that this was not appropriate or wasn't good, and then I found out maybe I needed to be more open-minded, and there's maybe more variety than I realized. Sometimes that has helped me in the past.
Or even taking something that they become obsessive about or come in already obsessing about and saying, okay, your job, personalized learning, take whatever that is, go build a case against yourself. And that way you can, force them to do the research, still on the topic that they choose, and you can even say, this is to make you argue the topic better, but as they do that, if they do it well, they'll find that they shouldn't be so sure about it.
And Eric, I'm very interested in the question that you raised of time. And Jen, you're nodding your head, so why are you nodding your head?
Well, that's the key, and it's so interesting because I have a lot of different ideas how I could personalize instruction for 25 people in my language class, but I just don't have the time to do that. So it kind of hinges on what you were saying initially, John, this idea that how can we build in ways for the learners to be in charge, or at least partners in that process of personalizing it themselves. So trying to come up with techniques. I mean, this is an obvious one, but in our language courses, we hand them individual vocabulary notebooks that they then are gonna fill in with the vocabulary that's most relevant for their positions and for them. But they need to be the people then doing that, rather than me trying to create a word bank that's gonna fit with everybody's needs, to personalize it. So trying to help people understand that that is going to help them, but also how can they do it?
And also, I mean, yeah, Jake.
Oh, I was just thinking about the time thing.
No, go
ahead. So your first question when we were doing our table talk was, I thought of that as my own experience with personalized learning, like as a student.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm curious for other people, just in this small sampling, like all the chances I've had to do independent work are very vivid in my mind. And I come back to the same questions like my whole life. Like one of them was just like how to record music, and then always come back to that. And so I'm just curious, like, and I admittedly don't really understand like start end to courses. Like I want to learn, so I'm gonna keep learning after the course. So I'm just curious, like, for people's experience having a chance to take on something independently and doing it personal, like your own way. If that really stuck with you, similar to how it has stuck with me.
I suspect it's very personality dependent. I am a very, like, as all of the insanely type A people in medical are, like, I don't want to, like, I don't want to enjoy it. I just want to achieve the objective because I got other stuff on my plate. So, like, put the academic hoop in front of me and I'll jump through it like the trained academic seal that I am. But, like, I don't want to, like, explore the possibilities. Like, I just want to do what you need me to do.
You want to discover your own hoop.
I don't want to know there's multiple hoops even. Like, there should be no existence of other hoops. And I recognize the, like, flaw in that and how it limits me, but it, like, at the end of the day, when I get to work at 5:45 in the morning and I leave at 9 o'clock at night, I don't want any more hoops. And I feel like we put our students with this intensive curriculum in the exact same position. They don't want to, like, spread out because they're like, I can only deal with what I have in my hands.
But sort of related to that, Jen, I do want to get back to your question. I mean, even with 25 students, I mean, I'm thinking at the beginning of a semester, you have, I guess, employees from the university or the system that come from different departments, and they might have different language needs, right? So maybe perhaps working in a medical department or working in HR, so the vocabulary and the syntax and the lexical items are unique. Do you think maybe asking them at the beginning of the semester, why are you in this course? What are your specific goals for language learning? Because it's not just about, you know, your idea of what they need, sort of maybe re-articulating that and allow them to tell you what their objectives are. I think that's sort of similar to what, Angela, you mentioned. Do you think that could be a way to help?
I do, and we do try to do that to some extent. We actually have the luxury of, we meet one-on-one with every student for a half an hour before the course, and it's balancing what we hear from them with the other, what we call stakeholders, which would be the people who are kind enough to allow them to do these classes on their shifts and really want you to focus on that workplace language. So sometimes the goals don't necessarily match, but at least we're able to figure out ways where we can say, okay, you learned how to make a telephone call today so you can call in sick, and then suggest to them what are ways that you could do this, you know, outside in the real world, in your lives, if your child's sick, calling the school, etc. We can't work on that in class, but we can at least maybe open doors so that they can figure out how can it be relevant for them in other ways.
In your instance, is there any way to move that onto Canvas? Those types of scenarios, or?
That's a good question. No, not currently.
Okay. So maybe in the works.
That would be interesting. Yep.
Nice. An example of a really hard personalized learning, maybe sort of way too complicated, way too convoluted, would be at the bottom of the digital activity sheet, there's Canvas mastery paths. That's on the digital copy of the sheet. There's also a tool called H5P branching scenarios. Is there anyone that's familiar with Adobe Captivate or Articulate Storyline? You want to share what those are?
Yeah. So I was telling Molly about it a little while ago. I kind of think of it as a clickable version of a PowerPoint presentation, although that's maybe not, it's a low bar. But essentially you can create a module, a self-contained module that you can like host on a web page that learners can interact with. So it might have a welcome screen, and then there are clickable buttons. You can add clickable buttons that might take you to another information. You can add like sound clips, video clips. So it's pretty much whatever you want. I've used them in a couple ways. One is to create a very self-contained clickable module where students can actually like choose a path and kind of go down. And that was for medical students, sort of clinical based, where they were given like a patient case. And then they could select kind of similarly like what labs they wanted to see next, and then they would get instant feedback because it was meant to be a group activity where they could like talk through but also get the correct answers kind of as they walk through. And then you can export from these as well to create videos. So I've created like a narrated PowerPoint where essentially it's the PowerPoint, but then you can make things appear or disappear, arrows or boxes, and so there's various tools for it.
And just to give you an example of one of these tools, and I think this could be relevant for many of the situations that have been described. So for example, this is H5P branching scenario. It's an interactive, open educational resource that you can embed into Pressbooks. A lot of this information is on the activity sheet, so I'm not going to drill down into sort of the nuts and bolts. But just to give you an example of this, so you have, for example, the idea of the course, the topic of the course is just very broad. Art of Europe, What's that? Oh, I'm not sharing the screen. Here we go. We're back. There we go. Slowly but surely. So, for example, as Angela mentioned, you sort of have a PowerPoint slide, content, text, etc. You can advance, read at your own pace as you would like. Clicking next. Obviously, you have sort of a self-check question. Perhaps an antagonistic emoji. Click some art periods, etc. What I'm trying to show you is when it gets to which path do you want next. There we go. And then we have this question, what would you like to do next? And this is a feature that you can build into the branching scenario to not necessarily, you can anticipate students' interests based on the previous semester, or you could actually invite them to collaborate with you inside of this activity. It is very technically intensive, but it could be a fun project for students who really want to pursue that background. And you have 3 separate little options for them to pursue in the future. It could be maybe circle back and learning more about Renaissance art as a particular genre, or jumping forward to another period, or just finishing the course. And I think that could be an interesting way to engage students into that learning. And it was something that we mentioned at the beginning, sort of that idea of student curated content. So they're generating the content. I don't know if it's necessarily more time intensive, Eric. It seems like that was your concern there, is how much time are you as the instructor investing. But in this instance, they are creating the content and linking it to one another. So by the end of the semester, you have this massive project of student interest in, for example, Western art. It could be something that is immediately applicable to your own circumstances, but I just wanted to share that with you. It is very time intensive. Yes, John?
Tomorrow we're going to talk about project-based learning. So if the idea of having your students work together to create something that is authentic and can be used over and over to save you time as an instructor, come back tomorrow morning.
And Iman, sort of your instance, your question or comment earlier about sort of breaking out of that cookie cutter mold. And I'm just sort of thinking from the academic or the administrative hoop, right? You have these course titles that must be taught every single semester in and out, but at the same time, these types of interactivities or student curated content could maybe make the cookie cutter a little bit more dynamic or a little bit broader, or not just a circle, something like that, as a way to get forward that.
So I have a question about
Yes.
this, because part of this appeals to me greatly from I would have to put the time in up front, but then it would exist in perpetuity. Well, not, whatever. If you're letting students create it, what level of oversight is there, I guess is the question. Because,
That's a great question.
again, we're not making frappuccinos. We're killing patients if things go wrong.
So we had an active teaching lab. Anoscope came in from genetics, and she talked about her students creating these Weebly sites, basic little page on the website, and they would look at the gene, for example, behind breast cancer. So something that had something to do with whatever they had personal familial connections to. So really close personal learning. But they also, because it was a public facing thing, to your point of we don't want to kill people, they had to double check, triple check, make sure that everything was perfect about that and very accurate. And they took a lot of pride in that. She said that if they had just done a paper on it, what are the consequences of doing that? Like, there's really no importance into checking whether this is accurate or not. But because it was out there, they took a lot of care. For the digital media project that we had done now 10 years ago, we had students in biology 151, 152 work together to create these biology tutorials and with videos and such. And they had to pitch it. They had to run the storyboard past professors, to a class and have an interview with them. And they took it very seriously, even though they had some very fun projects. But they had to get it right. They used metaphor and story, so it wasn't exact, but it was close enough for getting the point across.
And I think you can make that checking easier if you have a group and then one person is a fact checker, another person is a researcher. So there's like multiple layers of checking before I think you get the end for that.
And they watch after each other. Like it's in some ways you're having the students keep each other in check. So I don't know, I think there are ways, but then also recognize it is a student project and they might not get the very latest research, so add in some disclaimers.
And I could see, we haven't talked a whole lot about things like scaffolding or what, making sure your learning objectives are like flexible. So, if you have a learning objective that has something to do with like accuracy or like, something of that nature, that could then be something you're working towards. And if the project is scaffolding, so they have to pitch something or like, And then the other thing just was thinking of as you were mentioning it is, since they are, say you have two groups of students working on slightly different things, there could be an element of peer review to be like, okay, how confident are you? You now have to check this other project and like either say, show how it is supported or show how you have evidence against this thing. For I'm guessing like case diagnosis, like how maybe you see what the other group's diagnosis is and see if you can like confirm that diagnosis or if you find evidence so that could be a way to get them to also talk to each other and kind of not fight, but discuss productively their different solutions they're coming up with. And then, both groups agree, that might give them more credence if there's some kind of disagreement. So,
How do people? We have done some peer review with our students and they hate it.
Of course they do.
And part of it is, and they hate peer teaching because maybe it's our fault. We've bred distrust in them. But like they're like, I don't want to learn the wrong fact and then have to relearn all the facts again. Like I want the right fact, and I don't trust my classmate, even though they're insanely typing.
Assignment.
That would be. But I think
Okay.
so. If you haven't yet, should definitely reach out. Maybe there's people in school of nursing and school of medicine because they've been building in a lot of. I might have people you can talk to, but that then gets to this issue of like professionalism,
Right.
I think, and like connect because you are not. I mean, maybe in veterinary medicine, you're always going to work with other people and have colleagues and like people you're going to reach out with to confirm diagnoses and things. So being able to, not trust but verify, right? Like you have to have that being able to trust somebody and work with somebody because you're also putting your effort into it. So that becomes another learning objective, right? Of like not only and I think it's cool to be upfront with that. Nursing, when they flipped their curriculum, had a huge pushback because it was similar where students wanted to just like sit, be told information, which is fair, like you want to get it right, but there's big benefits to this other form, and so they had to really go through their students and talk about the culture of this kind of learning and why it's important. So it takes work, obviously, but tying it to professionalism in the workplace and the fact that you're going to work with colleagues can be a really powerful way to like make it not just a thing they have to do, but like this is important for building those skills, and that they have to do it. Otherwise, they're no, don't say that, but
You're right.
I think there are ways to make a powerful case for it.
I was just thinking in terms of the time investment in learning new tools, for example, Canvas already has a lot of tools that are already available to you, even if, and hopefully we can get you into Canvas because that might help make things a little bit easier. I'm just thinking here as a notebook or a vocabulary, something as simple as that, just sharing a Google Doc with you or in everyone in the course, just so that they can see what other people are doing as well, so they can find words or phrases, for example, that they're interested in using as well. Even with student curation and student utility value or case studies, maybe setting this up as a discussion in Canvas where students are interacting that way with one another, but also sort of, you know, a running list of new scientific articles that they found, new images, new videos that also represent course content. In terms of self-utility values and asking students, why are you here? What is it that you're interested in? An anonymous survey could be easy, or also just messaging with them directly. Thinking again of personal journals and self-identifying the learning objectives, those could occur as well in the discussion forum or maybe somewhere else. I'm not sure how to integrate those necessarily.
I could see,
I can think of Canvas collaborations, which has a
full disclosure, I hate Canvas discussion because of reasons, but you can always do things like Canvas collaboration, or even just outside of Canvas, it's the same sort of deal. You create like a Google document that's shared that students have access to as a place that they can add information. Even Canvas, you can have pages in Canvas that students are allowed to edit. I think there's revision history there too, and so that could be a way where they're adding to a shared resource that they can all see. It's a little less intimidating than like making a post, but you still have the ability to see who like added what if you need to. So yeah, I definitely Google Sheets or Google Documents as a way to create a collaborative resource could be really helpful.
So just looking at the clock and the list that we have, I think we've made some pretty good headway in terms of topics that you would like to address, in terms of course requirements and getting around the cookie cutter mold, which is a nagging problem. The question of agency and them deciding can be a rabbit hole just because everyone is different. If you have 500 students, how are you as the instructor and your TAs going to manage that? But hopefully there are sort of more scalable solutions that are available for that. Some ideas for how to integrate this into Canvas and Pressbooks. I think a lot of these are also on the activity sheet, so I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of that. But I would like to go up here to the learning analytics and figure out how that could get to more personalized content and personalized learning. John, you had a question?
Just as far as resources, I added 3 links to the bottom of the digital version of the activity sheet, which you can get to at probably the directions at the top of your activity sheet here, for the student-created websites and the student-created videos. So if you want to see what has actually happened here on campus, what other people on campus have done, we've got 3 examples listed there now.
And so thinking of that learning analytics sort of based on how students are performing in the course, and either currently or maybe in the past, and tailoring resources and experiences for them, either for remediation or for review or for maybe even jumping ahead, like in this example. You know everything there is to know about art in Western Europe, so just finish the course, you're done for the day. Cory, would you mind, as the learning analytics hat that you're wearing today, maybe some insight into what's going on the campus level for that?
Not on the campus level. So individual instructors have experimented with individualized learning and personalized approaches. The mastery paths in Canvas is one way. I know a few instructors that have done that. Basically it's a way of controlled release of the content, but it can be, and this is from about a year ago, the instructor that I was not collaborating, but just keeping in touch with how was his project going. He had technical challenges with it not always releasing even when all of the triggers had been met. But it's a nice idea if it works better than it did a year ago. All the ideas that you all have come up with. We do have a couple of use cases on the blended learning toolkit that come to mind. One example was an instructor was trying to do some TA training to make sure that her TAs were all able to support the students the same way, and some of the TAs had a tremendous amount of experience and some were brand new, so she basically set up 2 different modules and they could self-select. But again, that's nothing that's really being assessed. That's just content that she's providing that she built, depending on who her audience was. So the assessment piece is, I think, where it gets a little more complex sometimes. And I love the branching thing. And as a former online course builder, instructional designer, just that using some of those tools are tricky when integrating with Canvas. So if you're thinking about assessment, and if you needed to report to a grade book, you talk to somebody and make sure that everything talks together, because mostly it doesn't.
John?
Can I just mention something about individualized learning, differentiated learning, and personalized learning? It's on the bottom of the first page of your activity sheet, but how many of you remember watching the first new remake of Star Trek, the one where Spock was a little kid? Remember Spock in school? He was in these little dome dishes, and all of these things were flashing in front of his face, and he was like paying attention. Great example of individualized learning, where it's the pace. The content's already there, but it's the pace of how fast can the images flash for me to get it. Versus, I don't know, think about a walkabout where a person wanders out as a child into the wilderness and discovers things about themselves, and then comes back and has that as the basis. That would be sort of much more of a personalized learning, where they find out what's important to them. And I think that in some schools, like where the certification in med school, for example, you're right, we don't want them going out and finding where is the true sense of themselves. We want them to jump through the hoops that we have very clearly defined. So personalized learning is not necessarily the best thing to accommodate, or best thing to shoot for. It might be that your class lends itself towards them finding their own take on a particular thing, but it might be that you just want them to jump through the hoops as fast and efficiently, and they do too, because they're gaming the system. They want to get through it as soon as possible, right? So just a thing to keep in mind.
I think I think the nice thing, I mean, yes, with medical students of all kinds, you want to have precise information, but the nice thing about using a form of personalized learning, even with those disciplines, is sometimes I think medicine, you can be too rigid, and there is a lot we don't know, and I think, you know, sometimes medical students need to think outside or, you know, they need to be thinking more. So even if that's not what they're doing all the time, if most of the time they're just jumping through the hoops, it's good that they get that flexibility in there and realize that they might not know everything, and like you might have to go find resources that you aren't like just being given.
And that's the problem with the way our curriculum is set up, in the vet school at least, is like they'll memorize it, it's gone, because the next test is important. They have no personal connection to it. You try to give them cases, that helps. They can hang it on a case. And then, but ultimately the skill set they need is not memorize all these facts. They can look those facts up. The skill set they need is, how do I problem solve? And you need facts, but you need to know, do I have enough facts?
And you need to know
more
how
facts?
to know that those facts are accurate and true. You know, like
right,
some
yeah.
of that,
How do you find
facts
those, and how do you learn like to learn new information? How do you learn when your reasoning is wrong? It's taken me 4 years to figure out, like, I need to tell them that there are pitfalls in diagnostic reasoning, because they won't figure it out on their own. I mean, eventually, 10 years, they will.
Are the facts on the tests, or are the problem solving?
Depends whose course it is, and it's usually a mixture.
Yeah.
But one of the courses I'm heavily involved in is one of the first ones. They have to diagnostic reason, and we usually have someone fail the first semester because it's the first time they've really hit a really like problem-based exam, and some of them really struggle because they've been memorizing for 2 years. So, and everyone's trying to integrate, I think. I just think it's a very slow process.
That's hard.
And they're like, we've integrated so much, but it's really very little. So.
Well, just keeping in mind with sort of the aspirational idea of personalized learning, it'd be great if every student had, just like what John was saying, if every student had their own custom-built, tailored educational experience, and that, you know, even for 5 people, that's sort of overwhelming as an instructor, much less 500. But even just little small tweaks, asking students what they get out of the class or what they're looking for, this is a small way to make them realize that they are present in the course and they are, as an individual learner, relevant in the experience of the semester, whether it's 8 weeks, whether it's 12 weeks, whether it's, you know, a long professional program, just sort of integrating those little personalized, just personal, actually, I wouldn't say personalized, just sort of personal moments of sharing between students and instructors, I think perhaps can go a long way. And maybe one day you'll have these mastery paths worked out. And
artificial intelligence, it's coming.
What does that mean, John?
That means you don't have to do it. Instruct. You all have a job. Computer will do it. Right.
Well, hopefully we can resist that trend. And I ironically work.
There you go.
So any final questions, comments, concerns about, I don't know, the coming of artificial intelligence or?
I have a question. What questions have people asked their students that they, as from a like personalized kind of perspective, that they have found the most revealing or have given them really insightful information about their students?
Because oftentimes you say, what do you want to learn from this class? They're like, I don't know, you tell me.
Yeah. Yeah, but I was just wondering if any people was like, oh yeah, I asked them this question, and I was like, oh, I never thought about that before. Does anyone?
In the French department, we have a survey we give every semester, at the beginning of every semester, and it's not what do you want to learn, it's what are your past experiences with French. And generally it goes down the track of, I had this in high school, I love the course, I'm really interested in this because of that. So just trying to figure out, how have they, in what ways have they touched the subject before, versus what is it you want to learn, because that could be anything. I mean, AJ, who's left, he is a sponge, he'll learn anything he can. It just sort of it's a less overwhelming question maybe, just to figure out past backgrounds.
I was just going to say the same thing happens with us when we ask English language learners, what do you want to learn? They always say everything. And we used to give them a survey where we identified skills or topics, English, to communicate with healthcare, those kinds of things, and people would check every single one. So then we moved to choose 5, prioritize. So I don't know if that's a solution, is to, it's not totally open, but it's a little closed where you're giving people options, and maybe that primes the pump or gets them thinking, and we've got an other section where they can then fill in once they're thinking about it.
I think you have to ask multiple times, because the first time I ask, it's like, oh, I have no idea. But it might start priming the pump, it might start reflecting on the experiences that they've had with French, and then next week they'll thought a little bit more about it because they've connected with today's content, and then the week after they connect more with today's content. So the answers that they give at the beginning of the semester might be markedly different from the middle of the semester and at the end of the semester, but I think it's a process, and that process of connection is ongoing, and personalization is continual. So why make it a one-time thing?
Yeah, and that makes sense because I think our students very rapidly lose track of why they came to our school, because they just are trying to get through the day.
Yeah.
And I'm sometimes like, what do you think you're going to use from this? Like, what do you think? Why are we doing this? And sometimes they don't have an answer. Sometimes I don't have an answer.
The culture of mindfulness is something that we've never had in education. It's always learn, not why or what's the connection or stop and think about things. But I think research is continually evolving in that area, and it's becoming more important, part of the process.
Well, we are unfortunately out of time. If in the few minutes that you have before you need to jet off, if you could answer a few of these questions about your impressions of the lab, what additional questions do you have about the topic? We'll do our best to address those in our announcement for next week's labs. And any additional comments, feedback you can provide, that'd be great. On the way out, grab more coffee, lemonade. If there's cookies left, go for it. And we hope to see you tomorrow morning for project-based learning with the Wisconsin experience. But if not, maybe next week. And have a good afternoon.
The Wisconsin-based experience, or the Wisconsin experience, has a lot to do with personalizing learning as well. So these two topics are, in some ways, they can build off of each other.
Do that, yeah. I'm going to design lab around, see if they have ideas.
Cool.
Yeah, just
design lab. Design lab.
Yeah, go to design lab.
I've never been to design lab, but I want to.
I know, same.
First one.